Hello, BookTube. I actually went back to the Brattle Bookshop. Ordinarily, that doesn't happen anymore. I used to go every day. It's a great used bookstore here in Boston. Those of you who may be new to the channel, it's old. It's an old used bookstore, but it is an incredibly high turnover rate. They're out buying all the time. The stock changes literally every day. And on top of all that, there's a sale lot next door with thousands of books. $1, $3, and $5 books, all in relatively good condition. You can spend $10 for 10 books out there and get 10 good books in the process. And that was an allure enough for me so that when I worked in downtown Boston, for instance, a long time ago, or even not, I would go there pretty much every day. It's not a waste of time to go every day. You're going to see something new. I've fallen out of that habit. I fell out of that habit when my previous dogs, my two old girls, started to become sick and needy at the end of their lives. They didn't like me to leave, so there was a time when they were very much slowing down, but they weren't sick yet, they weren't dying yet, when they would sleep all day long, and that was when I left every day. And then they got sick, and I needed to go out and get relief, so I went out pretty much every day once I'd settled them, just for a little while, and then come back with my batteries recharged. But when they entered the end of their lives, first one and then the other, there was no leaving. So I got out of the habit of going to the Brattle, and I haven't yet picked that habit back up. I got out of the habit with my girls, and if some of you have been following the channel, you know that the second of my girls, Malin Moore, my beautiful pointer, overlapped with me getting a puppy, with me getting a little Schnauzer puppy, Frida, and I have just grown accustomed to working here, writing here, reading here all day long with Frida. She's such good company that it feels excessive and wrong for me to just leave her just to enjoy myself when she's stuck in the house. All sorts of considerations like that have stopped me from going to the Brattle regularly, but circumstances conspired to bring me there today. And so I shopped, and I had, thanks to one of you, I had a very generous credit, so I didn't have to worry about lugging books there for credit or anything like that. So I wanted to show you the books that I got. The first one is in hardcover, the big fat novel of a novelist that we just saw on this channel. This is Elizabeth George, who has a new book coming out in 2020 about writing her novels. It's not a novel. It's not an Inspector Lynley mystery, which made her famous. Instead, it's a book about her writing process. Those are always fascinating to me. Sometimes they're disappointing, but when I was talking about that book with you, I recommended a book of hers called Believing the Lie. It's her biggest novel, I think. It's her fattest one. No, it isn't. It isn't her fattest novel, but it's close. It's a big fat novel. Actually, how long is this? 600 pages. And it's really, really good. Lynley, it goes undercover, and there's a horrible family where everyone could be a suspect. It carries its weight very lightly. And I found it. I found a hardcover copy to reread. The book on the craft of writing by Elizabeth George, that's coming out in 2020, takes as its focal point an Inspector Lynley novel called Careless in Red. And I briefly thought about getting that book, but then I thought, I like this one more than Careless in Red. I'll get this one, and if the other one shows up, I'll get that as well. But I'm sure that book is going to whet my appetite. It did already. So, and as the year closes in, I'm going to want to do rereading instead of new reading. So I got this thing. It'll be a delightful 3 hours of just wallowing in this thing. Then the next one, also a big book, and with a bit of a sad bit of relevance, as this author just recently died. And when the author died, I bowed my head, of course, because it's an author who never displeased me. Not once in a whole career of writing history and biography. Not once displeased me. In fact, overjoyed me many, many times. And this book did as well. It overjoyed me, and I got rid of it. I had a copy, and I got rid of it. I think I sent it to one of you. So when I saw this for $1, I grabbed it. This is Robert K. Massey's biography of Catherine the Great. A friend of mine is actually quote tweeting this, has been quote tweeting this on and off for days now on Twitter, and those have been reminding me how wonderful a book this is. It's just a big, totally absorbing life of Catherine the Great. I loved it, absolutely loved it. It's a masterwork of biography. And I got rid of my copy, so now I have another one. Now I have another one that I won't get rid of. Then this next one is a collection of essays by a prolific writer on a subject that it's on gardening. And those of you who have been following the melodramas of this channel know that I have been toying with the idea of gardening a small patch of ground directly next to the house. It's perfectly situated. It's modest in size. I've never gardened before, but I've always been intrigued by it. I originally thought to plant some vegetables out there until it was pointed out to me, well, it's not that far from the road, and the vegetables are going to be absorbing every piece of crap that comes from the road. So you're not going to want to eat what you grow there. And then I thought, okay, I hadn't thought of that. So my idea now is to grow flowers there. And I intend to do that this spring. But I didn't. I intended to garden that patch of ground last spring, and I didn't do it because it involved a lot of stooping, because it involved a lot of work, and I just didn't feel like doing it. When the push came to shove, I didn't feel like doing it. However, in the run-up to that project, I discovered gardening writing. And I had never felt that I had, an active reason to read it before, and except for, staples like Onward and Upward in the Garden, but not anything else. And when I thought in the late winter last year that I was going to be making a garden in the spring, when I was at the Brattle Bookshop, I would grab gardening books, not just the practical stuff, but also reflections on gardening. And it was a whole new world of reading, and I loved it. So that sweet tooth remains. Even if I don't garden this spring, that sweet tooth, that new interest still remains. And I found this, Paula Dietz, it's called Of Gardens, Selected Essays. A really weird cover. Don't you agree? That is not a garden. That is snow. That is a completely snowed under greenhouse. You can't see any greenery on the cover at all. That is very strange as a cover choice, and that was part of the thing that drew my eye to it. This is just a bunch of, let me show you. This is a bunch of short essays, little essays and reflections and observations on all aspects of gardening. And I didn't know about this, and I can't wait to read it, whether I follow through with my own garden or not. And then the next book is an author I really love. I reread him all the time, and he cropped up a number of times on my library tour, especially here in this room. But his masterpiece did not, because when I was done with my library tour of the non-romance parts of my library tour, I realized that I did not have a copy of his masterpiece. That I had copies over the years, trade paperbacks and hardcovers, and given them away. I'm going to try to stop doing that. So I found his masterpiece, and I intend to keep it. This is David Kennedy, and his masterpiece is The Decline and Fall of the British Aristocracy. This is a beautiful vintage trade paperback. This would have been the form that I would have wanted anyway. The hardcover is a little uglier than this, and much bigger, much more ungainly to hold in the hand. And this is his story of exactly what the title says. The British aristocracy in the 1830s and 1840s and 1850s, at the pinnacle of their power, at the pinnacle of their political and social success, at the pinnacle of their wealth. He finds them there and traces them down through the decades, down through the following century to the doorstep of the present day. One long degeneration in terms of power, in terms of wealth, in terms of social standing, lawmaking ability, all that sort of stuff, and written beautifully. This is a fantastically readable writer. Anyway, most of the books that I showed you in my library tour were collections of his occasional pieces for the TLS or the London Review books or whatnot. This is his big book, and I didn't have a copy. So when I saw the trade paperback, the very edition that I would want in perfect condition, I grabbed it. So it will not be going anywhere. And then the last book, the last of this batch, is also a reread. And it's one that I love, and I didn't have a copy of it because I don't know, I'm just a trifle hard to please when it comes to this sort of thing. The hardcovers have never appealed to me. The trade paperbacks have never appealed to me. It's the mass market, the cover illustration, just the feel and the handle of it that has always appealed to me. So when I saw the mass market for $1, I grabbed it. It's The King Must Die by Mary Renault. This is her novelization, her euhemerization, her historical situating of the mythological hero Theseus. This is her story of what he might have been like, what the actual person might have been like that later gave rise to all of the myths and legends. And it made her a pile of money, and it made her a million fans. This is the book that people often called her masterpiece. If it's her masterpiece, then she's one of those rare writers who wrote two. Because if The King Must Die, if we're going to call this her masterpiece, we also have to say the same thing about The Persian Boy. And they're radically different. But this is the version that I like. This is the paperback that I fell in love with. And all the subsequent editions, the hardcovers, the trade paperbacks with the different cover illustrations, just haven't done it as well. And in the end, for $1, in the end, that means something, I think. What is the format, the edition, the look, the feel of a book you love to reread that pleases you best? So, so I grabbed this. And these are, the Of Gardens book I haven't read. But the Inspector Lynley novel I'm going to reread right away. I'm going to reread chunks of Catherine the Great unless I reread the whole thing. And I'm going to reread this. I haven't read The King Must Die in probably 20 years. So there you go. That was a trip to the Brattle, another trip to the Brattle. So Believing the Lie, it's a mystery novel. So I'm not under any illusions that this book will stay in my collection forever. I don't think that it will. I'm just, for $1, I can just reread it painlessly. Then Catherine the Great by Robert Massey. This will stay in my collection. This will go on the biography shelf. Then Of Gardens by Paula Dietz. Just a rapid fire collection of essays and reflections about gardening. Then The Decline and Fall of the British Aristocracy by David Carradine. This is his masterpiece. This is going in this room. And The King Must Die by Mary Renault, which is also going in this room. So that is yet another Brattle trip. How much fun is that? So I don't know how many more Brattle trips there'll be, but again, you will be the first to know. So I'm going to wrap this up. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.